All right. Hello, everyone. This is Damon with Flow State. I got Taylor with me, and I have two very special guests. I have PUCOKIE, right? Is that right?
PUCOKIE.
PUCOKIE.
You can just call me Emily.
Emily. And all right. And then I have both are pretty heavy typology YouTube contributors, and I have Erik Thor as well. He's been contributing for several years now, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been around for like 8 years now.
Okay, so yeah, quite some time. So big heavy hitter in YouTube as far as typology goes. He has his own system. It's called NeoJungian Typology.
Yeah.
We're all here today to actually talk about duality as whole. But before we do, I'd like to set some terms. Erik, if you don't mind briefly introducing your system, what it's about, and then going from there, that'd be great.
So my system, NeoJungian Typology, is about who people are in a state of flow. So I don't type people based on how they appear or how they act in a normal situation. I type them based on who they are at their best. So I believe everyone has like this self-actualized type representing their strengths and their interests and their core motivation.
How do you identify that?
I look at how a person is and what a person does when they are the most happy and when they feel the most confident and when they feel the most balanced, as opposed to who they are in stress or when they are anxious or what their defense mechanisms are.
Okay.
So on the topic of duality, you could say an INFJ has INFJ as their flow type. And that means at their worst or their biggest weaknesses are anything that an ESTP is good at, in essence. An INFJ can sometimes lash out and take on the traits of an ESTP and the most negative sides of an ESTP. But at their best, INFJ's greatest strengths are introverted intuition and their ability to formulate concepts and to understand harmony between people. So I try to find out who are you really at your best? What's your core motivation? What is it you want more than anything else? And what is it you tend to do when what is it you tend to struggle with the most? For an INFJ, it can, for example, be extroverted sensing in the sense that you feel people don't pay enough attention to you, or you struggle to be on the spotlight, or you struggle to deal with active sensory environments. That's a weakness. That's a stressor for an INFJ.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's interesting. So it's not about necessarily what you're even good at. It's about what makes you feel the best, right?
Yeah. Like you can be good at something you absolutely hate doing. However, you tend to feel confident in your dominant functions, right? So you can be very confident about something you're also not very good at. So that's also an issue. INFJs can be confident that they're good at something that they haven't actually developed or truly matured into.
Mm-hmm. So if you don't mind me asking, since you self-identify as INFJ, what is it that makes you the most happy?
For me, it's having harmony with other people, feeling at peace. It's taking time to formulate a concept or come up with an insight about something. It's reading a book, diving into fantasy novels, just like learning about people. It's figuring something out about myself, having a self-realization moment, like, oh, wait, this is who I am, or understanding my own emotions, or understanding other people's feelings.
Okay. And Emily, do you resonate with that at all?
It's interesting. I don't know. I guess I do like harmony in some ways, but I wouldn't say I'm the most happy in those situations necessarily. I think in person, I'm a pretty controversial person. I like to stir up the pot in a lot of ways. But I do really enjoy being close with people. But I would say I feel the best when I'm with people that I love in a sense, but also like, I don't know, I really like to have some sort of influence, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
So power is important to you?
Not in this traditional sense. I don't feel like. But Yeah.
Like,
Great.
I believe that there are a set of core values that everyone has. You know, everyone has some things. Like my girlfriend would say freedom is one of her biggest things. She hates when people infringe on her freedom and when she can't speak herself or be who she is. And she identifies as an ENFP personality type. For me, I think one of my core values is harmony, because I feel often at my worst when I'm around conflict and when I feel that people are stirring up drama or making an argument just for the hell of it. You know, I much prefer when people can understand each other and work together and see each other's point of view.
That's
That's
interesting.
something I think is very important.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it is. Sorry, I can't hear myself speaking because the input volume I think isn't right. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because I mean, I like when people get along and stuff, but I'm not. I don't know. I kind of like being in environments where I guess interesting things happen. I'm not going to start drama just for drama's sake. I definitely don't, and I try to avoid stuff like that at all costs. But at the same time, I do really like when things get when there's a strong emotion in a room. And if I need to be argumentative with someone, I will. I'm not going to back off from it, but I don't necessarily seek it out.
What about you, Al? What are your core values?
Taylor, you want to go?
I find too much harmony to be stifling and kind of, I don't know the right word for it, but it makes me feel claustrophobic. So I try not to be that guy that necessarily stirs up drama, but frequently I am. Just to be completely honest about it. So,
same, unfortunately, same.
So, you know, I certainly don't find my own personal flow state to be in harmonious environments. Quite the opposite. I think that I do better when in a bit of chaos. And if things are too harmonious, surely, you know, that sort of the unspoken assumption is that this harmony is a false environment, and surely there's something we could be doing better. So if we just shake up the Etch-a-Sketch and go back at it, it will improve. So that's sort of how I've always lived my life and how I've always viewed things, whether it's right or wrong or for better or for worse. Probably a lot of the times it's not for better, but that is just how I interact with the world.
Yeah, because for me, I've always been afraid of conflict in a bit. I've kind of avoided whenever it's conflict around me. I've kind of pulled out, and like I got drained by it very quickly. So it was very hard for me to understand that other people could actually like conflict. But for some, like for ESTPs, for example, I find that they can enjoy the competition of having an argument with somebody, like throwing things back and forth, seeing out who comes at top, you know, having that wrestling of wills. Mm-hmm. So I've had to later on in life come to accept that actually, yeah, argument can be healthy as a catalyst to get things to happen and to make change in a situation. And that came out especially when I came into politics and I realized, okay, if I ever want to make something happen, I am going to have to take a stand, and I'm going to have to be honest and have open what I feel about things. I have to push things sometimes and be okay with it.
That's interesting because I feel like naturally for me, so like I always find myself in leadership positions, for better or for worse, mostly for better. But I think in situations, I don't try, like I definitely don't seek conflicts. In Enneagram, I'm a 9/8, so that's kind of an interesting situation. But I also, I don't know, it just seems like my presence alone sometimes
causes conflict.
Causes a reaction out of people. Like I'm not even talking about on YouTube, because obviously I think my breakup definitely caused conflict with people on YouTube. But like that aside, if I think about what's it called? Just like in everyday life, I find that people will either like me or they won't. And it's not that I'm being mean or something, but I give off a very, I've been told this in person, I give off a very strong presence. Like people are a lot of times intimidated by me, or they just like, they say that, I mean, I don't think it necessarily comes across always online, but people say that I have a very strong personality.
Yeah.
So people just, I don't know, get upset by that.
Yeah, I think NJs have a very natural intensity to them. So we are very focused. We have a very strong idea of what we want. And I think a lot of people can be unnerved by that and can see us as troublemakers just because of it.
So
Yeah.
pivoting real quick, Erik, you got unique views on duality and particular relationships and combinations of types in your system. Could you go over the top 3 and why do you think they're effective?
So yeah, exactly. I have a top 3 relationships that I find to be positive. I believe everyone has different needs and your needs are personal. Like you have different things you tend to attract in your life and that depends on your experiences and your development. So you can't say anybody or any type has an absolute match that's going to be perfect for everyone of that type. But you can see 3 basic common patterns that I see almost for everyone. Like either you date a duality match like we're talking about here, and I think that was the traditional idea of love in the past, like that we sought out an opposite, a person that kind of represented the strengths where we felt weak and somebody that could push us and to get out more and to learn to see different sides of things. The other option is to date somebody who has the exact same type as yourself. And I think that is a great match for a friendship love, in a sense, really connecting with somebody, really getting to know yourself in a way, really seeing different sides to yourself and learning about your strengths and weaknesses. And then the third option, and this is what I came to go for, and that was an ENFP personality type. So I call that inspirational match. That's when you go for somebody that has similar values to yourself, but a different attitude and approach to life. So they do things differently or in a way that's different to what you're used to and out of your comfort zone. And so they catalyze growth in you and push you a little bit out of your comfort zone, but still towards things that you tend to like and value a lot. So people tend to go for usually either of those 3 or a combination of those 3. Like the ENTP is a good combination of kind of the duality aspects of an ESTP and the inspirational aspect of an ENFP.
So share with me why that third option would be a good option, considering that all the functions are in an opposite attitude, and it's something that you would assume that you would reject. What would make it effective in your system?
So I believe this match has a lot of problems. I believe there's a lot of issues with miscommunication. Because the other person does things differently, we can wrongfully assume that they are doing it because they have a negative intention, that they're like the ENFP can feel that the INFJ is too secretive, that they withhold things, that they don't open up. Lots of those things can come up and have come up in my own relationship as well. But the positives I felt have been that you do start learning to open up more. You do start learning to let the ENFP take initiative more. You do start opening up to you start opening up where you used to be very set in your ways about things. If I used to have a very strong idea of what I wanted and where I wanted to go, the ENFP would get me to see different sides, and that would be growth for me. Because if you're too stuck in yourself, you also become stagnant as a person. You become static. You become less open. You miss out on opportunities. So when I met my ENFP girlfriend, I also saw a lot more things happening in my life. I ended up having a lot more options than what I had before. I ended up noticing I could do a lot more than what I thought I could. So a lot more things also happened in my life. I got out of my head a bit.
How long have you guys been together?
Soon 3 years now.
So your system's based in a personal development methodology where it's all about growing. What do you think about, say, another particular type that's not one of those 3, and how could that develop an individual?
So another interesting one to contrast against would perhaps be an ISTJ dating an INFJ or an ESTP dating an ENFP. I remember you said that you were dating an ENFP. Was that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I find that one quite interesting. I don't see that one happening that often. I've heard a few that have explored that matchup. I'm actually curious to hear from you. What do you feel are the advantages of such a relationship?
There is a part of wholeness there. You realize that you're blind to certain pieces of information, and because of that, you start seeing things differently. You have inner potentials. You start seeing things in a more wholesome way. It's hard. Don't get me wrong. It's difficult sometimes because it's completely opposite of what you're used to. But when you realize that we shut off and filter information, then once you get that information from someone else, you can reject it, which is the normal procedure, rejecting it. But then there's the other procedure, which is maybe there is actually something here. Does it matter? Sometimes it doesn't. But I make a lot of mistakes in my life, and having someone watch my 6 is really, really important.
So I've had the opportunity to explore the INFJ ISTJ dynamic a little bit at my workplace because I've got another coworker that's an ISTJ. And what I noticed with her is that we are kind of like, we see everything differently from one another. You know, where I assume that everyone is good at heart and everyone has good intentions. I feel ISTJs tend to be a lot more suspicious. So they tend to be a lot more, can we really trust that person? What if they like have bad intentions? What if they come from a bad place? You know, so I think I get what you mean when you say that they make you see things from another perspective in a sense. They make you notice your blind spots. Like she had a blind spot that I thought was very clear. I think I'm super aware of what her faults are, and I think she's super aware of what my faults are. And I think that's kind of interesting, actually, because that's also quite good for development.
Right. I think that's the whole key is it's all about maturity. It's all about growth. It's about finding a perspective in which you can see value in, even though your psyche doesn't value it. And that's where I think the biggest challenge for me is, because I find myself in the same problems sometimes over and over again. And it's funny because when I look at other people, and I go, if you make the mistake once, it's not a problem. But if you keep making that mistake, it becomes a problem. And I'm the person that keeps making that same mistake, and I keep having the same conflicts. And
so do you ever find yourself feeling like she's insane or crazy?
No, not talking about in the relationship, but more of outside of the relationship. I get in conflicts all the time, and I'm like, am I just a target for conflict because I bring it on to myself, I guess? And I've tried to be more peaceful in the last few years, and I have not been successful at that. I find myself in conflicts all the time, and I wish I didn't sometimes, because it's like there's got to be a particular perspective in which there's balance, which I have tried to aim for. And I think that has a lot to do with my background, especially finding peace in chaos. So I think that's where the biggest challenge has been for me is personal growth has been a big avenue in my life. And I had a lot of mentorship in that direction as well. So I'm really focused on continuing to get better and compensating for the areas that I'm weak.
What kind of people do you tend to go for, PUCOKIE? Who do you find yourself to be most interested in?
Like romantically?
Sure.
Well, first of all, I would say definitely not the same. I mean, having the same personality. Just from dating someone with the same personality as me, made me realize that was probably not a good idea.
I've had that too.
Especially if the person isn't as developed as you psychologically or emotionally. I think that can be very difficult when you're the same personality, because you almost see like your past self or your future self, which is kind of an interesting situation. I guess for me, I've never dated an ESTP, but I have dated an ESFP. I mean, I've dated a lot of different people. I mean, I've been on dates with basically every personality type. But I would say for me, the relationships that have been the best that I've had so far are like an ENTP, an INTJ, or an ESFP. but I just have not had experience romantically with like my dual. But I can also see what you were talking about with the ENFP. I have a lot of really good friends that are ENFP, including Michelle Wilson. And we're just able to talk about a lot of stuff. And just knowing like one of my best friends, my friend Anna, is an ENFP, like, I would not say that it's the easiest relationship. I think we tend to see each other as we tend to kind of miss things, but I think once you like, and there can be conflict in that, but I think once you get over that hump with the ENFP INFJ relationship, it can be a very good relationship. I don't know if I would ever want that romantically, but I do find that ENFP guys tend to really like me. And actually, the majority of the guys that I guess want to date me, even at this moment, are ENFP, which is interesting. I don't know what that says, but
I think ENFPs like to have a mystery to crack a lot of the time. And I think INFJs can be that sometimes.
yeah.
I feel the biggest conflict that I've felt with ENFPs has been their desire to rush things that I like to take slow, almost always. Like they always want everything to happen now. Like they get an idea and then they want it to happen. And yeah, I always tend to wait. What my issue was, I waited so long a lot of the time that nothing ever happened.
I think that's true. I mean, when I think about it, like for example, I went on a date with an ENFP and he tried to kiss me after the first date. Like he actually like went in for the kiss and actually kissed me, and I was like backed away. I mean, we've hung out many times since, but I think they try to move things along a little bit longer. I mean, a little bit quicker than what I'm comfortable with, I guess.
So as far as duality goes, I think the biggest thing that is missed, I mean, I did a little poll on Twitter and we got a pretty decent sample size as far as how many people actually saw the post. And we had 16, I think, total people voted. And the lowest score was actually yes, as in duality really works. The highest score was it depends. And I think that what that it depends really means is that it really depends on maturity. I mean, I think duality relations aren't actually just so smooth like everybody thinks them to be. It's more of learning that, okay, are you really open to receiving feedback in this area? Are you open to be able to grow in this area and have someone tell you how this thing, I think they're just over glorified. And that's my position typically on that. It's just glorified, just like in some particular aspects, okay, it's the perfect relationship. It's so smooth. Whereas I think identity is the smoothest relationship. It's just someone of the same type. I think that is like the easiest communication there is because you're talking about the same things.
You're competing over roles though. Yes. I mean,
but I've
never had anything go with an ESTP chick. It's like, hey, we hit it off really well. And then 2 hours later, it's like,
yeah, now what?
This is how I act, not how you act. You know?
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing is I don't know if there's a lot of attraction necessarily in that particular pairing, but I do know that it's very easy communication. And there's the power struggle, which honestly they both enjoy anyway. And
true.
It's okay, who's going to be on top today and who's fighting for what position today. And but it's fun. It's enjoyable. Yeah. And I think that's what the aspect is. Taylor, what's your insight on duality? What's your perspective?
I think it's a good jumping off point. I think it's a good starting point, and it does allude to compatibility, but I think where it starts to fall apart is when people put too much faith in it. They go, oh, well, we're duals now. It's happily ever after. No, it's not. It's just a good starting point.
Yeah.
If you need one. But if you're looking to Socionics as a starting point for your relationship or your love life, you probably are already coming from a place where you're going to need some relationship practice.
Well, personally, what I think about the dual relationship is I think it's very true that you have to be at a certain maturity level for even it to start off, or even like to see each other, because INFJs and ESTPs don't typically hang out in the same areas.
Right.
And I don't know too many ESTPs in my everyday life. I do know a few, and I have a very good relationship with them. And we get along, like, I would say it's one of the, I mean, the person that I'm thinking of is like my friend's husband, and we get along so well. And I could see if he wasn't like, you know, obviously her husband, and we like met in a different way, and you know, liked him in that way, a lot of different factors. I could see how that could be like a really good relationship. But I don't think that a lot of times, even throughout life, because I don't think every single type develops themselves or even is trying to develop themselves to the complete level. I think a lot of people get stagnant. So I wouldn't say that it happens as frequently. And I definitely agree with you, Taylor, that a lot of people, they'll figure out, oh, this is my dual. And they'll be like, oh, this is the person I need to date. And that's just like a very unhealthy way to approach socionics in general. But I personally do think that it is maybe the best or the better relationship that you can have if it works out, if the stars align, I guess.
Yeah, I strongly argue against using a relationships theory to find a date or find a match. Like I see a lot of people messing up because they start second guessing whatever relationship or type they're dating right now because, oh, I heard that one is better, and that everyone says my type should date this one. So it causes you to kind of second guess where you are at right now in your life, because everyone is exactly where they are supposed to be in life. You know, you attract what you need in your life. I had a relationship with an INFJ once as well. And I came into that because at that point I felt so misunderstood and I didn't know who I was anymore. And I felt kind of alienated. And meeting an INFJ, I felt, wow, finally I met somebody like me. Finally, somebody who thinks the way I do. So that was it. At that point of time, it was so important for me to get back my bearing. And yeah, coming through that, I came to realize that, oh, actually meeting yourself is kind of overrated. Yeah, it's not as fun as I thought it would be, or as revealing, or so as empowering as it should have felt. Instead, it felt like we were arguing over who got to dominate the relationship most of the time. Like we fought over the same space.
I think in friendship situations, your identity or like your same personality is a good friendship. Yeah. But I agree with you. I mean, just to say plainly, I thought that relationship was boring. The INFJ relationship, I just felt bored.
Yeah.
There were other factors as well, but it was just also when you're not at the same psychological level, that makes it even worse, I feel like.
Yeah.
So, and it's very hard to be like, oh, you're on the exact same psychological level as someone. Like, it very rarely happens. So that's why I think that relationship is not so great for romantic relationships. Friendships, a great relationship.
Now to talk about duos a little bit, the way I see it with ESTPs is like I can be quite impressed by how ESTPs seem naturally unflappable. Like nothing seems to get to them. They seem to be always quite calm and like down to earth. They seem to be strong and confident in areas where I don't tend to feel very confident. I've noticed a certain type that tends to, a certain group of people that tend to be more interested in a dual relationship. And my theory is people are more likely to entertain dating an opposite if they've come through having a lot of hardship. Like if you've been through like a lot of heartbreak, or like if you had an unsteady situation in your life, and it's got you to second guess yourself a little bit, like, wait a second, it's not all like everything's not what I thought it would be, and things are not as great as I was hoping it would become, and my vision kind of didn't pan out the way I wanted it to. Then I think that's the like ideal time to meet an ESTP for an INFJ, because they can kind of give you back some confidence and also push you a little bit and get you out of your rut in a sense.
Yeah.
But I think on the other side, INFJs have a certain amount of, I don't know how to phrase this properly, a certain amount of durability, or you know,
resilience.
Right. It's a very much more resilient, sort of tough type. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, than at first they appear, or then they're given credit for. And so, as you know, an ESTP-8, I mean, somebody that can bounce back from whatever bullshit I dragged them into, that's invaluable. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, something that I seek out the most, I've found, because I guess I don't talk about this so much on my channel. I'm definitely not like someone that's been in a ton of relationships, but I've dated a lot of people. Like I've been on a ton of dates. And in my real life, I'm kind of known for kind of dating a lot. Like, I mean, not all the time. I'll go through phases. So I've met a lot of different people in my life. I guess that are at least interested in that way. And the thing that I have found is I really need to be with someone that has a strong personality, because I can easily, it could be seen as manipulative, and I notice this about myself, so I try not to do this, but I can be very persuasive, extremely persuasive, and I can get people to do basically anything I want in my real life. And if I notice, and this is the same thing as friends, if I notice that a friend, well, if I notice that a person is weak in nature, I cannot be friends or associated with them, really. And if I'm dating someone that has that kind of personality, I know this kind of sounds bad, but like I just can't see a future with that person. They have to be able to challenge me. And this might just come with, I guess, maturity or something, but I just can't be with someone that I can easily just tell what to do. There has to be some type of, like, I don't know, push and pull kind of thing. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that's fair. So I had a question. You said earlier, Emily, that some of the audience was asking, what is psychological level? You said if you're not on the same psychological level, how do you evaluate that?
Okay, I mean, it's mostly maturity, not, I saw that as well. It's not intelligence. But I think that can play a role. I can only speak from my experience, but what I mean is when I say psychological level, I'm talking about maturity levels, like how I guess personally, like how much they've developed themselves personally. I think with the cognitive functions, I think if we are able to psychologically mature, we're able to almost tap into those functions more, or at least use them or be aware of them. And I think when, let's say an INFJ and an INFJ, when an INFJ is stuck in an I and they haven't really developed themselves further, or wherever that looks like for whatever type, it's just hard. So like, for example, I can look at the same personality type and just feel like, oh, this person reminds me of myself when I was a child, if that makes sense. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just means that they haven't matured in some ways. This doesn't mean that I don't know. I don't know how to describe it.
I feel like I had a similar experience watching my dad. Because in many ways, my dad and I are very similar. We have our differences. We're not exactly the same type, but we have a lot of similarities. And something I came to notice was I learned what not to be by seeing what he did. Like I learned what not to do. I noticed his bad habits, and I noticed what he did, and I noticed myself doing it, and I thought to myself, I don't want to be like that as well. I don't want to do that. When you're with somebody or hanging out with somebody that's very similar to you, and you notice a bad habit that you also have, I think that can trigger personal growth. but it can also trigger like repulsion. Like you can get very upset by them for doing the same thing you do. So you can also get to that point where you get like, you're so stupid for being like this. But in reality, like you don't notice you're projecting your own like issues that you can have sometimes as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I mean, I definitely relate with that, Erik. The idea of kind of seeing people's strengths and weaknesses, especially if you're the same personality type, and like realizing like basically like in your head, you're like, you have the tools to do this. Why haven't you done this? Especially if the person's older than you. So like my situation, not to like, I don't want to draw too much attention to that, but that's something that I found in my previous relationship with the same personality. I was reminded so much of myself when I was like younger, yet he was 5 years older than me, if that makes sense. Plus there were other things as well that were not type related that were going on with him personally that I didn't agree with either. So it was just a bit different, I guess. But I don't have too many romantic experiences with like the same personality type, if that makes sense. I have more experiences with other personality types. So that might just be a him thing. I don't know.
Do you feel like that? Do you know any? You said you know very few ESTPs. What is your perspective of duality, Emily? What do you think of it? Like, what is your angle?
So I don't know too many ESTPs. I mean, so I don't know that many compared to some of the other personality types, but the ESTPs I do know, I get along really well with. And I could see why, because, for example, I went on a date with an ESTP once. I wasn't attracted to him physically, and there were a few other things as well, but like, I guess psychologically and like on many senses, I could see why this relationship would work out really well because it just felt like a very smooth conversation. It didn't necessarily start off like that, but when we got into the flow of the conversation, basically, I find with ESTPs, they want to do stuff that I've always wanted to do and vice versa. But I don't always find myself doing those things. But if someone was like, oh, do this with me, I'll do it, if that makes sense, and I'll want to do it. Whereas with other personality types, I may not like that are a bit different. I wouldn't necessarily want to do the things that they ask me to do. I don't know if that makes sense. And I also find that when there are similarities in morality, I think that's a huge thing. So like, I don't think that I would get along with every ESTP, but if we were morally similar, I think that could be a really good basis because my friend that's an ESTP, we have very similar morals and ways of looking at life. But the way our personalities interact is it's just interesting. And it's always like we have fun and we understand each other and we want to be better people. I don't know.
Erik, a question for you would be that as far as, let's say, non-romantically, how do you think duality can add value to one's life in a non-romantic sense, such as a friendship or just even a meeting or an encounter?
Yeah, I tried to think about that for myself, and it's difficult because I don't have a lot of experience with ESTPs either, more from a distance. Something I came to think about that I've noticed with others is that I think often the duality relationship starts out with a misunderstanding. Like I think it's that, oh, the ESTP is such a yuck and so superficial and all, like that misunderstanding, like, wow, oh, I don't want to have anything to deal with them. That keeps you from talking and interacting with them and having that first conversation. But then when you start actually talking and, life gets you to start interacting with each other, that's very much challenged very quickly. So you come to realize that, wait a second, no, that's not, they're not what I thought they were. And I think duality has that element quite often, that it starts out with some implicit judgment on both ends. And but turns into recognition. Like you have to ultimately admit to your weaknesses, that your weaknesses can have their advantages. Like, yeah, there are times when it's good to be like this, and there are times when you need to be pushy, and there's times when you need to be a bit loud to get your voice heard. And yeah, ESTPs can teach you that. But in the beginning, it can be a reluctance, like, oh, why are they so loud? Why do they have to fight about everything? Why do they have to make everything into a game, you know?
Right. I think one of the advantages that I had in my life was I had a lot of NI users around me, from mentorship early on and telling me the consequences of my actions. I would jump into something without thinking about the outcome of that event, and as a result, I'd keep falling into the same situations. But as I got older, I had a lot of people tell me, well, if you do that, here's the consequence. If you do that, here's the consequence. If you do that, this will lead to this and this and this. And at first, it's like, you can't possibly know that. You don't know exactly how this is going to turn out. And so I'm resistant to that information at first. And then eventually I'm like, why do you have to be right? Why do you have to, why do you have to be right? Like, and then I don't want to admit it, right? I'm like, nah, you just got lucky. I don't want to brush that off. But I would struggle with that quite a bit, because they'd be like, look, and there was a time where I was in a situation and my girlfriend was trying to comfort me because she knew I would react, and she knew that my reaction would cause a major problem. And she's like, you need to calm down. She's like, okay, you're going to get worked up. Calm down, calm down. And I was like, not even mad yet, but it was starting to boil. I felt my blood boil. And I was like, I'm about to rip this person apart. I'm about to get this person. And she knew that I was already thinking this, and she already jumped ahead and was like, look, you're going to have to calm down, because if you do this, here's what the outcome's going to be. And it's not going to be pretty for what you're trying to do. She goes, is this in line with your goals? Is this really serving you? Is this behavior going to serve you today? And there was another situation, I don't know, of a few days ago. And Trey, who also did the same thing, he goes, he tried to throw his body in the middle of one of my conflicts. And he was like, and he told me, he said, let's calm down, everybody. I said, no, I'm not going to freaking calm down. I was like, this is not the time to calm down. This is the time to start tearing things up. And he was like, dude, it's not going to serve you, man. It's not going to serve you. And I was like, okay, it is going to serve me, because I want this person to be publicly humiliated, and that's going to bring me satisfaction. And and he was like, is that really serving what your long-term goals are? And I was like, I'm not even thinking of my long-term goals at this moment. I'm thinking of retribution. And that is the only thing I'm thinking about. So naturally, I think it serves me. So that's where the maturity aspect comes in. And it goes, look, it's not really helping you. You enjoy it right now. You enjoy winning this battle, but it's a battle that you're wasting time fighting when you could be devoting that energy elsewhere. And I'm just like, okay, so I'm going to learn to kind of back off, right? And not take these battles head on like I want to in general. So I think it feels like a little slap in the beginning when you're getting something from that, let's say, inferior function, right? It's like you want to resist it, but then at the same time, you're like, yeah, I recognize that I'm not very good at it. So maybe I should actually start listening to this piece of information. But that's where that maturity aspect comes in.
Yeah, I was thinking that one thing that pulls you into the duality dynamic is also the desire to prove the other person wrong. Like if the ESTP is like, oh yeah, you're all talk, you're never going to do anything with this. Like this is just a crazy idea. Then you got to be like, but I'm gonna do it for real now. I'm actually gonna do it. I'm actually gonna. So it can also be like a dare and a push that you need to actually get yourself doing something. Like I think ESTPs can sometimes dismiss what you say, or be like, what? So then you feel as an INFJ like encouraged almost by that dismissal, by that brief dismissal, to go, hey, actually, I was right. Actually, I did know it was going to happen. Actually, I understood the consequences. I had this figured out.
And I resonate a lot with that, because I will do a lot of things to prove a point, or sort of out of spite. Fuck you, my way is right. What are long-term consequences? But you can only get called out and then screw up a situation so many times before you start kind of going, well, maybe that person's not an idiot. Maybe I'm the idiot. I'll stop being an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes you do fall flat on your face and like, yeah, you're right, this was a crazy idea, and I was gonna throw away a lot of time doing it unless you would have called me out on it as well.
It happens quite a bit for me. I mean, many times in the conflicts that I get in, Trey has, I've lived with Trey, so naturally the conflicts I get in, he'll see me get into the conflict and he'll be like trying to put himself in there like, you might want to calm down, everybody settle down. Typical NI, right? Trey associates with INFJ. So typical NI is just like, here, this is probably not going to work out. And at the same time, this happens over and over and over again, but I want to show that I can control the situation. And then sometimes the way that I approach things, it's laughable to him because he's like, I think that was like overkill. You didn't need to go out and you publicly destroy this or make it seem like a military operation and doing something that only required this. So that's where I felt was pretty funny because it's like, I'll laugh at the fact that, you know, he can't get himself into action a lot. He's like constantly contemplating things. Whereas I'm more like, dude, just do something. And I think that's where the struggle with duality is. You have to be at a point where you're more open-minded. But I think I'm particularly challenged in that area because I like to win. And if they're telling me something that is not something that I agree with, I want to prove them wrong. And as a result, I actually wind up proving them right, which really pisses me off.
Yeah. I was thinking earlier today, I was observing, like, I was watching a couple in Married at First Sight having an argument. And the guy won the argument and he got her to back down. But I thought to myself in my head, like, dude, there are some battles you don't want to win that you can't afford to win. Like, even if you do, the backlash that you'll get from winning that argument or pushing that person at that point can cost you a lot. So
She's going to poison his food.
Which battles do I want to win? And can I let the other person win sometimes as well? Because relationships are, of course, about compromise.
It's the question of, you know, I can win all the battles I want, but somehow I still lose the war.
Yeah.
And that happens quite a bit. It's like I'm winning all these battles, but ultimately the whole purpose of the war was lost in between and I lost. And that's what I don't like doing. And I get that constantly. And I think that's like the catchphrase of my life is like, I did all that. I created more damage than I should have by just fighting those senseless battles, which I shouldn't have done.
I thought Trey was an LII. Oh, sorry.
No, you can go.
I thought Trey was an LII.
So it depends on which taxonomy we're using right now, but long story short, most people in Socionics think he's IEI as well.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah. The experts
that
think
would make more sense.
Yeah, the experts think that, and you know, I've been kind of convinced that way too.
Okay.
Taylor called it out pretty early that he didn't think he was LII.
Yeah, I didn't think so either.
Yeah.
Okay, then that makes a lot more sense because we were talking about duals, and I was like, I know we're talking a lot in Myers-Briggs terms, but that's very confusing.
Right.
Okay.
I'm trying to savor that, save this conversation from going into the taxonomy discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, like ultimately a problem is we're all from different systems in a way. So we all represent different viewpoints. So when we say a certain type, we might have a completely different idea of that personality type. Yet at the same time, like we have to believe that all systems are about essentially the same thing, that we are trying to describe the same concept, but we're coming at it from different angles.
And I think that I am not such a hardline purist to say that they don't that you can't translate one or the other. I think effectively, whatever type is using NI first and FE second, or SE first and TI second, they're pretty much going to be the same thing across the board.
Yeah, I agree.
MBTIs is a little stupider for ESTPs than SLE for Socionics, but all in all, I think it translates well enough to not disrupt any sort of conversation on duality or whatever.
Yeah, I was just under the impression that's why I got confused because of Trey's type. But if Trey's an IEI, that makes sense.
Makes sense to me too.
Sorry, I didn't clarify that early on, but yeah, exactly. He comes with the IEI label in Socionics as far, and he was typed as INFJ and MBTI, so there is some overlap. But the reason why I'm more of a purist is because if you want to fully understand and learn a system, let's say that I wanted to learn Neo-Jungian typology, I would start from scratch. I wouldn't try to roll over something from Socionics or MBTI because it makes the learning process so muddy.
Yeah.
And so that's the whole reason why I'm so divisive between the two. There is some crossover, of course, like maybe something that Erik, you call TE, will translate TE to MBTI or translate as TE into Socionics, but it all just depends on what it is. But in the learning process, when people are trying to make a distinguishment, I think that's the biggest challenge. There is a little bit of crossover, but it's about different aspects and different ways that the pie is being sliced.
Yeah, like I've come to use the archetype approach kind of to understand the personality type. Like I believe, like Jung, that there are some archetypes that exist across all cultures and all places in the world and across history. And like that's the best angle to understand the cognitive functions and personality types. Like I believe that the healer is a good archetype to understand introverted feeling, and the philosopher or the sage archetype is a good metaphor for introverted intuition. So I've used that to seek some kind of purity in my approach. Like if you can have a clear image of a type or a function, that way you can also have a clear understanding of personality trait in itself, and then it's something that all personality systems are trying to understand, but I fundamentally believe that we're all trying to figure out and understand the same archetypes, but we don't have the exact limits defined yet, and we don't know where to place it and where it should be exactly, and where one ends and when one begins.
Yeah, I think that's the way to really approach it, though. So I think there's that confusion but the principle is still the same for the sake of this discussion, which is duality in one system is duality in another system, right?
Yeah.
And that's the universal principle in which we can talk about duality. So I think that is the angle in which we should take it. And I like the idea that you use archetypes, hence why your name is Neo-Jungian. So you pull that information from Jung, where Socionics has discarded a lot of the Jung stuff. It's still has some of it, but it's moved a lot away from a lot of that. So at least in my understanding, there's people in the Discord which are obviously much more knowledgeable than I am about it. But I think that Socionics has moved pretty far away from Jung.
Yeah, Socionics is very inventive and very experimental. I feel like there's so many different theories in Socionics, like it's hard to know where to begin, and so many different models as well to keep in mind. It's like one big creative experiment. So you can take away a lot from it, but there's also a lot of things in there that are probably just crazy ideas.
I think there's a lot of crazy ideas in Socionics, but I think Model A is pretty time tested. It's the one that I tend to rely on the most. But yeah, there's new models, new ideas, new things people add, and that's what you get when you get something that's a little more open source. You're going to naturally have all these contributors bring something in that I don't know. I don't know if it stood the test of time as long as Model A has. That's why I stick to that primarily.
So how strong is the belief in Socionics that duality is the ultimate match?
Depends on where you're coming from. Some people feel that it's overrated. Some people feel that there was particular socionists back in the day that feel that it's like the epitome of a perfect relationship. I think we've evolved from that, realizing there's more variances in people than just 16 types being able to mesh together. So I think that's where the challenge is. So it's just you can't really pinpoint it like that. So when people are talking about that particular aspect, I think that's where the challenge is really in trying to understand each different system. And though there is, like I believe what Taylor said, there is that overlap, and I think that's very pertinent. And I'm more of a purist, though. If I'm going to stick, I'm very categorical with the systems. I tend to put it in a box, and then I put that hat on and I talk that language. I can talk MBTI all day, or if I put on a Socionics hat, I'm going to talk Socionics, but let's not bring in the MBTI terms. Let's not bring in the MBTI taxonomies. And I'm very much of a purist in that regard, because it just doesn't help learning. People get very confused on that. And I think that's why I'm so standardized in that sense. So but pivoting back to duality, I'm curious that if duality is really a thing, what do you think it takes to make a successful relationship in a dual relationship other than maturity? Is there anything else that you think would be a necessary component? And this goes to Emily or Erik or Taylor.
I think, first of all, you got to find each other. One thing I've noticed throughout any duality discussion I've ever been in is that nobody really ever meets their duals in real life. It's not until once you realize what it is that you start finding your dual. So I guess I don't have a solution to that, but I'd like to hear what everyone else thinks about where you even meet your duals.
Yeah, it might be that you have to really go out somewhere you're not used to meet your dual. Like it might also be that you meet them at the work environment, for example. I can see that happening more commonly because there you get a bunch of different types meshed together. It's hard to see them meeting up in a regular circle or friends or based on a similar interest. I think that's quite rare, but it should happen there as well sometimes. I feel to make a dual relationship work, I think you need to accept that you're not good at everything and that sometimes you need help from other people and that you don't know everything. So you have to lose some of your ego, like that idea that, oh, my hero function, my dominant function can fix every problem and I can take care of everything. And if I just follow this recipe the whole time, everything will be great. I think you have to come out of like, no, wait a second, that wasn't true. Like I followed my dominant function, but it really didn't give me everything I thought it would. And it didn't make me fully happy. And I still had a lot of things I struggled with. So then you have to accept that, oh, that person is really good at that. And I could learn from that. So you have to be mature in a sense that you are open to learn from and to do things differently and to try things out that you wouldn't normally do.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Erik was saying. I think you kind of do have to put yourself in situations that you wouldn't necessarily do. And that's why a lot of, I guess, duals don't really meet each other, because we tend to be close. We tend to be actually in the same social circles as, say, our conflictors more than like our duals. So just putting yourself, like, I think it does require a level of maturity and self-evaluation, like you were saying. You can't have a huge ego, at least in a sense where you, like you were saying, Erik, is you're not so tied to this notion that you're like the best and nobody else is able to kind of work in ways that would balance you out. For me, I think as I've gotten older, I have gone into places or I've done things that are a little bit out of my comfort zone. But by doing that, I'm able to meet more people and interact with people. And I definitely think you have to be on the same moral level with that person. And that can often be hard for certain dual relations. Because again, it may not be, you would have to have like a certain maturity level. And I think this applies to every relationship that you have. But I personally wouldn't, I would say the only relationship as far as Socionics goes that I would never like want to mess with would be like the conflictor relationship. I very rarely see that relationship ever work out, even in a friendship sense. But Yeah, I think just putting yourself in situations that are out of your comfort zone that you think that other personality would go to. So for example, for an ESTP, doing something more physical, like doing some type of sport, maybe going to like a climbing gym or like even going to a bar or a club or something, you may meet more of like the SLE type. Whereas like for an IEI, I would say where we hang out the most are like at coffee shops or like just maybe low key areas, or even, at least for me, I tended to gravitate towards discussion groups or just like groups in general that we would talk about both psychological and other type of subjects.
Yeah, same for me.
So, yeah.
Damon, what's our conflictor type?
EII.
An INFP in Myers-Briggs, or an
Alright.
INFP. And EII.
I think for me, I've noticed that, especially historically, growing up in high school, college, whatever, before I knew about socionics at all, I would notice IEIs, but briefly. I think IEIs, at least to get my attention, one sure way to do it would be to sort of do things that would jump in front of the SE stream of doing shit, whatever that is. It could be as simple as, saying hi or however, but looking back, it seems like I would notice an IEI, but then SE keeps happening. And it's, as an SE Dom, it's kind of hard to notice things that are quiet.
So I gotta tune out soon, but I kind of want to end also with saying that with duals, I think another thing you have to do to really open up is also get rid of some of your like implicit judgments, like you might have, like preconceived notions you might have about that personality type. Like if you notice that you're like holding like a lot of like stereotypes and shallow quick notions about a person, I think that can really get in the way of the dual relationship even kicking off in the beginning point. Like you might even, if I see that person at the bar, you might go, oh, no, that's not for me. I don't want to talk to that kind of person. Or you go to a sports place and you'll be very dismissive very quickly. So, but sometimes you might want to give it a try, even though it feels a bit weird. Go out of your comfort zone and go like, hey, maybe they are smarter than I think they are. Maybe they have more to teach me than I thought. Maybe they have a little more depth to them than what they might appear to. Like that's a very good starting point, I think, for a lot of people, especially INFJs.
Well, I would certainly argue that I don't think there's any particular type that I absolutely cannot have in my life. I would definitely argue that point for me personally. I think I have a lot of type. Pretty much most of the people who have been in my life, even remotely, or people on my old Slack server, I've gotten in some kind of conflict with them. So getting in a conversation with the conflictor is no different than getting in a conversation with anyone else, because ultimately we wind up butting heads anyway. And I think that's where I don't really see it as anything particular, like, oh, I'm not going to have that person in my life. I don't make those type of judgments in the first place. Like, unless they do something that I find is extremely unethical in some regard. But in general, I don't make that kind of judgment.
I'm talking about romantically. I'm not talking about friendships or family. I mean, I have many ESTJs in my life, but I'm not romantically involved with any ESTJs, nor do I think I've ever been on a date with an ESTJ.
Okay. Well, I mean, in general, I thought you meant the other way. So I would say that, yeah. I don't know. I don't think I could say that I've been in a relationship with an EII at any point. I couldn't even say that I've dated one, but I don't know. I mean, back then I didn't know Socionics either, so I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
So Erik, I know you got to pop off, so we appreciate you being here and obviously providing a lot of insight on your system and your ideas. What I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a link in the description to your channel. Is there anything else that you'd like in that description?
No, just link back to erikthor.com. I can encourage everyone to go to my website and try out my personality test, my flow type test, and see if you get the same type in my system as you do in Socionics or the MTI or whatever system you're using. That can be a good starting point if you want to learn more about it. Otherwise, I just want to say
Oh, sorry.
thanks for inviting me here, and it's been nice to follow the chat as well, and it's been nice to do something with you as well, PUCOKIE. Since we've been talking about it, but we kind of never got to it.
Yeah, I've kind of stopped doing live interviews on my channel recently, but I was gonna say one of my friends who's an ENFP, she doesn't do YouTube right now, but she wants to, but she really loves your channel, and she's learned a lot about typology through your channel.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah.
So have a nice evening, everyone, and see you all in another live stream, perhaps.
Thanks, Erik. And
Bye,
thanks for being
Erik.
here.
Bye.
All right, so we are going to start wrapping up this show. Emily, do you want to add anything? Taylor, you want to add anything?
About just duels in general.
Sure.
I think the best approach when it comes to duels is, I think a lot of people, when they get into socionics, we've talked about this already, but they want to be like, okay, this is going to solve my issues. This is going to solve my problems. And people do get very extreme with it if they really get into this like tunnel vision of like, this is who I need to be with. This is the personality type. All the other personality types don't matter. I just don't think that's a good mentality to have in any sense. I think it's good to be aware of those things. And if you're able to find your dual and you have like the other similarities, the foundation, that could be a really great relationship. But you also shouldn't excuse things that you wouldn't excuse from other relationships just because they're duals, quote unquote. Like, I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to whether you have similarities and you're able to bring something to the table and you're able to support each other and respect each other. And obviously love each other. So
yeah, I think that's a fair point. So, all right, everybody, thanks for joining us today. I'll wrap this up. Thanks again, Emily, for joining us as well. And we'll see possibly on another live stream. So everybody, thanks for watching. Take care, okay?
all right, bye guys.